So we may well have another gigantic rally, but that would probably be the last. There's been a lot of pessimism around. In my experience, when there's huge amounts of pessimism, usually something happens to break the pessimism. We've had it in the last couple of weeks because the Federal Reserve has talked about, well, maybe we're not going to be so tough or whatever it is. This is not a projection, but suppose there's peace in Ukraine or something.
Right. Yep.
Something often happens to break the pessimism. You have a big wave of optimism and a gigantic rally. Gigantic rallies have often happened at the end of bull markets or the beginning of bear markets. So we may well have another gigantic rally, but that would probably be the last one if you ask me. Usually at the end of a long bull market, when you have a gigantic rally at the end, it's usually the end. I mean, if you can remember NASDAQ at the end of 1999 and 2000, it skyrocketed. It's something like doubled in 6 months or something, just as we were about to collapse. This is the way markets work, fortunately or unfortunately. So I just want to point out, when you have a lot of pessimism, start thinking about going to the other side for a while.
That's a great point. Some of the most violent upwards rallies have happened in bear markets, which is somewhat similar to the warning you're giving here. We've also had people that have said, we've had the longest secular bull market in history, 40 years or so by some people's measurement, and you would expect that to end with a blow-off spike as opposed to a whimper. Not saying you necessarily share that point of view, but the scenario that you just laid out could in some ways validate what those people are saying too. But what I hear you saying is there are reasons for why we could have a bad rally. What I hear you saying is I wouldn't trust that as being a secular return to a bull market. It's more like the last gasp. It's the last rally before things really roll over.
Well, as I repeat about the end of the 1999, 2000, with that beginning of that bear market, it skyrocketed there at the end after a long secular bull market. And then everybody thought, happy days are here again. This is going to go on forever. An interesting sideline. In 1999, I think that was the exact year, the Wall Street Journal, not some neighborhood newspaper, started using, with capital letters, the expression, the new economy. Capital N, capital E. This is the way the Wall Street Journal referred to the world. It was the new economy, capital N, capital E. They don't do it anymore, by the way. It took them a while, but eventually they stopped capitalizing new economy. But that's how things get in long bull markets. That's how wild they get. And that last gasp, as we were discussing before, can be wildly exciting if you're on the right side. I've seen too many times when everybody was on the same side of the boat. You better go to the other side of the boat when that happens. Back to what I said before, when the central banks panic and start printing money again, inflation comes back and bonds are certainly in a bubble. They're not going to be in a bull market for decades. Property is going to have problems, as we've discussed. Many stocks have been a bubble. The only thing that's still cheap are real assets. And if they print money, when they print money, it leads to some things going higher, but those are usually silver, wheat, real assets. The price of sugar is down 70% from its all-time high. That's not a bubble. The price of silver is down 70% from its all-time high. Those are not bubble kind of numbers. So the only thing that is cheap that I know of, yes, there's property some places, yes, blah, blah, but the only thing as a class are real assets. And they do go up when there's a lot of money printing. And so if people know about real assets, maybe they should do more research and homework. And maybe that's a way to protect yourself. But some stocks will go up too. The hot shot stocks will go up again for a while. Yes, everybody will rush in and say, hooray, happy days are here again. Amazon will go through the roof for a while. 10 cent will go through the roof for a while. But in the end, usually for a while, you have a bull market in real assets. And for those who know what they're doing, be prepared. I've started investing in Uzbekistan recently, but most people watching this show couldn't find Uzbekistan on a map. It was one of the Soviet republics. It was a disaster. It was ruined by the communists, and even after the communists. And so it's very cheap. But now the people running the place run the country the way you and I would. And it's cheap, and there are not many stocks. So that might be an example. But my main answer to that question, only invest in what you know about. If you want to be successful, stay with what you know. Everybody watching this show knows a lot about something, whether it's fashion or cars or sports or something. Stay with what you know if you want to be successful. If I told you you can have 25 investments in your life, you wouldn't jump in and out of every hot shot you hear on a program or somewhere or in the newspaper, and you would be a successful investor. But many people will say, but that's boring. Be boring. If you want to be a successful investor, be boring. Don't go down to the bar on Saturday night yelling about how much Amazon you own or whatever it is. Be boring. Go down to the bar on Saturday night and let them all say, oh my God, there's that guy again, talking about his boring stocks. Be boring if you want to be successful.
As a father, raising children, and how can you help them have some optimism in this future, that they're stepping into where there will be some of these challenges? And, you're a successful guy. What are some successful secrets just for happiness in life you're passing on to your kids?
The answer to that question is, and I don't know how to do it, but is to teach them to figure out their own passions and then follow their own passions. Don't listen to their teachers. Don't listen to their friends. Figure out what they love. And if people laugh at you when you tell them what you love and what you're going to do, that really means you're doing the right thing. You're on the right track then, because those are the successful people in life. They get up every day. They never go to work. They get up and have a good time. And they're usually successful because they love what they're doing so much, no matter how absurd it is. And even if they're not successful, they don't care because they're happy. Would you rather be unsuccessful and happy or successful and miserable? So I hope I can help them figure out what they really, really love and encourage them to do it, especially if it's absurd and especially if everybody else thinks we're wrong.